Welcome to the Parsha Perspective. Each week, we will delve deep in a weekly Torah portion to find a practical and insightful way to enhance your daily life. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Rabbi Shalom Yamini, and each week we will look into the weekly Torah portion to find practical and insightful ways to enhance your daily life. This week's Parsha Perspective is in honor of our homeland, Eretz Yisroel. May Kadosh Baruch Hu, may God continue to protect our brave soldiers, and may God return all the hostages from Gaza immediately. This week's Parsha Perspective is in loving memory of Shlomo ben Edward ben Efraim, Galya Margalit bas Shimon, and Yirachmiel ben Gedalia. May their souls be uplifted, and may their memories be a blessing. This week is a double Torah portion that concludes the fourth book of the Torah, Sefer Bamidbar, in our Parshas Matos Massei, Walk It Back. Our Parshas begin with Moshe Rabbeinu teaching the laws of vows and promises to the tribal leaders. He explains how a vow is made and how it can be annulled, and under which circumstances a father or a husband may cancel a vow made by a daughter and a wife. Moshe Rabbeinu is then instructed to retaliate against Midian for sending their women and princesses to entice the Jewish people into sin. Moshe Rabbeinu gathers 1,000 soldiers from each tribe and appoints Pinchas to lead the charge against Midian. The Jewish army emerges victorious. They kill the 5 Midianite kings and every fighting-age male, including Bilam, the non-Jewish prophet who once tried to curse the Jewish people into destruction. And when the soldiers returned, they presented Moshe Rabbeinu with a full account of the spoils and divided them equally amongst the Jewish people. We conclude Sefer Bamidbar with the laws of Yerusha, inheritance. While inheritance normally passes through the sons, an exception is made for the daughters of Tzlafchad. Since their father had no sons, they are granted his portion with one condition. They must marry within their tribe, the tribe of Manasseh, and they do this so the land must remain and can remain in the ancestral portion. And this law ensures that tribal boundaries remain intact as the Jewish people emerge and prepare to enter the Holy Land, the Promised Land, their inheritance from God through Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. However, a question comes to mind. Before the end of the Torah portion and the conclusion of Sefer Bamidbar, we learn about the Arei Miklat, the cities of refuge. Moshe Rabbeinu designates 6 cities of refuge for those who mistakenly killed another person. They must move in and remain in the cities of refuge until the death of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. The pasuk states emphatically that no money can be paid instead of the punishment for murder, or instead of going into the Arei Miklat, into the cities of refuge in the case of accidental death. But why would we even think that money can be paid instead of a punishment which is so severe? Why is the idea of money even brought up as a way of a kapara, as a way of exchange for life as a whole or as life in the city of refuge? The Chizkuni, Rav Chizkiah ben Mana, gives us a simple explanation. And he writes that in many areas of Jewish law and halacha, financial compensation is accepted in place of physical punishment. If someone damages a person's property, or if one causes bodily harm, they can pay restitution. But when it comes to taking a life, the Torah draws a line. Life cannot be measured in money. Unlike an injury to a limb or damage to property, the loss of life is something that payment cannot restore. The Chizkuni points out that even in the case where God himself reserves punishment, such as death penalty carried out by heaven and not by a court, financial atonement is sometimes allowed as a temporary measure. But when the Jewish court, when the human court is involved, when the case rests in human hands, in the hands of human judges, there can be no replacement for justice. No payment, however great, can balance that scale. Taking a life creates a wound that only justice can begin to heal. However, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rav Menachem Schneerson, gives a deeper and more profound explanation. He writes that the exile to an Arei Miklat, to a city of refuge, is not simply a legal sentence. It is a spiritual directive. When someone causes a death, even by accident, a rupture is more than just a physical wound. A soul has been lost. A boundary has been crossed, and the person who caused it cannot continue life as usual. Something must break open, something must change. The Torah removes them from their land, from their rhythm, from everything they know that's familiar. They are sent to live in a designated city where they're safe, but also held. And this space becomes a container for introspection, forcing the person to sit with the weight of what just happened and begin the slow process of inner return of tshuva. The Rebbe explains that this exile is not about punishment. It's about real tshuva, a return that must be lived before it can be spoken. If money was allowed in place of exile or punishment, it would create the illusion that accountability can be outsourced. It would allow someone to return to comfort without confronting their actions and what it caused. The Torah refuses to let that happen. It refuses to cheapen human life by allowing a wound to be closed before it is felt. The Rebbe teaches us that tshuva must be personal. A person must walk the path themselves. It is not enough to say the right words. It is not enough to offer compensation. The exile to the Ari Miklat, to the cities of refuge, becomes part of the soul's healing. It is where the person begins to become someone new. Someone who can return not only to their land, but to their soul, to their integrity. And that's why the Torah is so emphatic. Not only because life is sacred, but because real healing begins and requires process. A person cannot buy their way into a home. They must live their way back to their land. This is why we conclude Sefer Bamidbar and the storyline of the Jewish people in the desert, not with a story of great miracles, but with laws speaking to accountability and responsibility. Laws about Arei Miklat, the cities of refuge, Yerusha, inheritance, boundaries and conditions, each one reminding us that holiness requires structure. A people cannot live by inspiration alone. They must build a society that values justice, humility, God, and accountability. And as the nation prepares to enter the land of Israel, the Torah prepares them to live with each other so they can create a home for God in this world. The Rebbe's profound lesson is ever more relevant as we find ourselves in the middle of the 3 weeks and about to enter the 9 days of mourning for the destruction of the Beis Mikdash. And these days were not just about remembering what was destroyed, they are about recognizing what still needs to be repaired. The Beis Mikdash was lost through sinas chinam, basis, hatred, and spiritual detachment. And it will only be rebuilt through personal accountability and national unity. We must let go of pride and of blame, and specifically let go of distance and return to the truth of who we are. A people responsible for one another. A people chosen to bring light to a dark world. In our daily life, it is imperative to realize that real growth begins with accountability. When we face the consequences of our actions, we create space for change. It is tempting to fix problems with quick solutions, with surface-level apologies, but real progress comes from when we slow down and take responsibility. The people who carry the setbacks with honesty are the ones who rise stronger. They are the leaders, they are the people who become whole. And they go on to succeed far beyond their wildest expectations, turning even the hardest moments into a path forward. There's a quote that I saw was inspired by the Rebbe. When you take responsibility, you begin to rewrite the story. May we merit to enter the 9 days in Yerushalayim with the rebuilding of the third Beis Mikdash and the coming of Mashiach. Have a great weekend and good Shabbos. Thank you for tuning in to the Parsha Perspective. Check out our website, theparshaperspective.com. Send thoughts and comments to theparshaperspective@gmail.com. Till next time, thanks for listening.